Hello everyone, and welcome to my video on the Indycar Iceberg. In this first video, I will focus on the first tier of this monster iceberg chart made by brazillianhuevolution on Reddit, focusing on the Indycar series as a whole, with hundreds of entries spread across 9 tiers. You can stay tuned to the channel in the months to come as I complete covering this iceberg. I have also omitted some entries on the iceberg that I thought were necessary or that were not interesting enough to cover in order to not make this video too long. I have also added some topics that weren't originally on the iceberg, and I have rearranged some topics up and down the iceberg to make this video more focused and to fix what I think were some flaws in the original iceberg. Now, if by some reason you have not seen an iceberg chart or don't know what it represents, the topics nearer to the top are more well known, and as you go further down, the more obscure and speculative they get, and at the very bottom, the most conspiratorial and disturbing facts reside. Now, with all necessity aside, time for the video. Tier 1. Rookie. Indianapolis 500. If you've ever heard of IndyCar, you've probably heard of its namesake event, the Indy 500. It is a 500-mile event consisting of 200 laps, held every Memorial Day weekend at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It was first held in 1911, and besides breaks during World War I and World War II, has been held every year since. It is doubtless the most important event on the IndyCar calendar, with practice and qualifying sessions taking up the entire month of May, and the race itself rewards double points. It is a race steeped in tradition, and it is also considered a crown jewel event, whatever series it has been a part of. Mainly IndyCar, but it was also part of the F1 calendar during the 1950s, despite not many F1 drivers participating. It is also part of the Triple Crown of Motorsport, along with the Monaco Grand Prix and the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which has drawn many non-IndyCar drivers to participate. Many events down the iceberg are associated with this event and have happened here, but the race has much more history in it, and I'll try to keep this short, as there are many more things to cover. 257,327 permanent seats. At the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, there are exactly 257,327 permanent seats, hence the name of this iceberg entry. However, the seating total can be expanded to over 400,000 for races when that amount of spectators come to see a race, usually just the Indy 500. For most other races, however, the 250,327 seats are just enough, as attendance wasn't how it was 20 years ago, and the place with default seating numbers looks like a ghost town most races now. Indianapolis Motor Speedway Road Course. The idea of bringing road course racing to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was planned as early as 1992, but in the late 90s, the owner at the time, Tony George, started renovations to build the road course and to bring Formula One to the circuit for the first time in 50 years. The road course was completed in 2000, just in time for the Shiny Track's new event, the United States Grand Prix. The event went fantastically, drawing over 200,000 spectators to see Michael Schumacher win the race en route to his 3rd championship. The track hosted Formula One up until 2007, being left off the calendar due to declining attendance in the years after the disastrous 205 United States Grand Prix, in which only 6 cars ran the race due to tire trouble that weekend. After Formula One left after 2007, the road course found itself host the MotoGP Championship from 2008 to 2015, using an altered layout to accommodate motorcycles, going the opposite direction of the track in which the F1 cars ran. In 2014, the IndyCar series started racing on the road course each May as part of the lead up to the Indy 500, using an altered layout from the F1 track to better accommodate Indy cars and to give fans a better viewing experience. And the IndyCar series still runs the race to this day. Since 2021, NASCAR's Cup and Xfinity series have also run races on the road course, in which many moments of chaos have happened since then. Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum is a museum hosted on the grounds of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, hence the name. It contains many mementos of racing history, containing more than 25 Indianapolis 500 winning cars from the first years of the race to the modern day, and also the Borg Warner Trophy, the trophy given to the winner of each year's Indy 500. It also has many more vintage racing cars not related to Indy, from road cars to endurance racing cars, and is altogether a treasure trove for all racing fans new or old. The Gasoline Alley. The Gasoline Alley is a nickname for the alley of garages within the infield of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which houses the race teams throughout the entire month of May, and for whatever other races are going on at the Speedway any given weekend. It got its name from a comic strip that was published in 1919, and people started calling the pit alley the nickname in the 1920s and after. The garages used to have wooden interiors and were personalized to each race team up until the mid-1980s. A replica still exists at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. It used to be a team-only area, with it being an area known for which teams conversed within each other, but today is now open to the public. The gasoline alley sign at the exit used to be a point of no return for cars entering the track, and getting rolled back in early usually meant that you crashed out of the race, but now teams are allowed to come and go to perform minor repairs during the race. The gasoline alley is a place steeped in tradition and legend, and it will continue to be one for years to come, despite its diminished importance. The Snake Pit. The Snake Pit is the location of the party hub of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It began as a location for people to gather and to party in the 1920s, but it really earned its reputation in the 1960s when it got its name for the wild, drunken, and chaotic parties that happened there during the entire month of May. And then in the 1970s and 1980s, it began more to look like Woodstock than Indianapolis, with alcohol, mud, music, and more things that I don't think I'd be allowed to talk about on YouTube that you would probably imagine happening at a music festival at this time. All being a very regular aspect of parties at the Snake Pit. A particular humorous event happened in the 1974 running of the Indianapolis 500, in which a group of completely drunk streakers invaded the track, in which one managed to inflate a flag stand and take the checker flag completely naked before falling off due to him obviously being drunk. The decline of the Snake Pit happened with the move of the pit to the Turn 4 infield in the 1990s and other measures to distance itself from the Woodstock-like environment of decades prior. The Snake Pit now is not what used to be, with it now predominantly being a music festival, but echoes of what used to be are still around, with the rowdiness being present, if not as much as the 70s and 80s, where chaos, drunkenness, and the carefree attitude of the decades prior predominantly ruled. Speedway, Indiana. A few years after the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was constructed in the outskirts of the city of Indianapolis, Indiana, a suburb sprung up around it in 1912. This town was called Speedway, Indiana. It was the brainchild of Carl G. Fisher, automotive magnate and founder of the Speedway itself, which he devised the town's purpose to house workers for the two nearby factories which he owned, and the town itself was prioritized around the automobile, with it being the first to prioritize the car over the horse. It maintains automotive-centered culture to this day, with the town itself housing the headquarters of the United States Auto Club, so the Lara Indycar factory, and also being the home of IndyCar teams AJ Foyt Racing and Harding Racing. Residents of the town are known to go all out with decorations and festivities on race day, as it would be a waste to live so close to a track of Indy's caliber and to not at least attend a few races. A nice break from the typical stereotype of homeowners near racetracks incessantly complain about the noise, even though they no doubt knew a track was there when they moved in. I'm talking about you, people who live near Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. The bottle of milk. In the normal post-race festivities of most motorsport, the winning or podium-sitting drivers usually celebrate with some sort of alcohol, usually champagne, or some sort of substitute. But after the Indy 500, the winner will celebrate by drinking or spilling on themselves a bottle of milk. This tradition started in the 1933 running of the race, when the winner, Louis Meyer, drank a glass of milk to cool off during the celebration. He then repeated this when he won the race again in 1936, and it became a tradition. One executive at the Milk Foundation saw it as an opportunity to gain some publicity and made a deal to make the drinking of the milk a tradition. After a small break from 1946 to 1955, this celebration has been a custom ever since. Before the race, each driver participating is asked their preference of milk between 2% fat or no fat in the case that they win, although they could undoubtedly save some time by leaving Antonio Ferrucci off that list. Borg-Warner Trophy. After the winner of the 500 has drunken their milk and celebrated with the crew, they receive the trophy for the win, the Borg-Warner Trophy. It has a surprisingly storied history, going all the way back to 1936. It was the successor to the Strauss Trophy, which had previously been awarded to winners each year since the inception of the race in 1919. The trophy was first made by the Borg-Warner Automotive Company in 1935, hence the name. It was first awarded to the winner of the 1936 race, after being unveiled earlier that year by Speedway owner at the time, and also General Mad Lad Eddie Rickenbacker, at a dinner he hosted. It is made out of silver and is over 5 feet tall, taller than my buddy Gavin, weighing over 153 pounds, and is also hosts the likeness of every 500 winner ever from the very beginning to the present day, having to be expanded in 1988 to include more space for future winners, as all the spaces for the winners' faces has been taken up by that time. The most prominent feature of the trophy is the unclothed figure on the top waving a checkered flag, which must have been a moment of foresight on the designers for the incident that happened during the 1974 Indy 500. The trophy itself stays permanently housed at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum due to its value, and the winner of the 500 gets a replica to take home instead of the actual trophy. Pit Stop Challenge. Pit Stop Challenge is one of the many traditions to happen in the month of May on the run-up to the Indy 500. It takes place on Carb Day, the final day of practice for the month of May, in which pit crews of selected teams compete for which team can perform a stop consisting of swapping out all 4 tires and refueling the car in the fastest time possible. It is run in an elimination format, with the fastest crew out of each round advancing to the next round before a winner is crowned, earning the $100,000 prize. It was first held in 1977, the winners then being Carlio Racing, and has been a staple in the month of May ever since, besides 2008, when it was cancelled due to rain, and 2020 and 2021, when it was cancelled due to the ongoing pandemic. The most recent winners of the writing of this video are Penske Racing, getting their 18th win in 2022, with their first being from the 1981 writing of the event, and to this date, 5 winners of the Pit Stop Challenge have gone on to win the 500 in that same month. The Holman family. The Holman family is a family whose roots run deep with those of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and IndyCar in general. Their family's association with the Speedway started in 1945 when Anton Holman, heir to his father's successful wholesale food company, bought the Speedway in 1945 from previous owner Eddie Rickenbacker, and then co-owned it with 3-time Indy 500 Wilbur Shaw, who was the track's president. After Shaw died in a plane crash, Anton stepped up to the position of president, which he led until his death in 1977. His son, Tony George, took over the role of the president of Speedway in 1989 from Joe Coultier. He first started out his tenure as president by making improvements to the track and started planning the construction of the previously mentioned Indianapolis road course. He then brought the NASCAR Brickyard 400 to the track in 1994, the first time another race in the Indy 500 had been held at the Speedway in quite a long time. He also helped bring IROC, F1, and MotoGP to the track in the time he was president, before his resignation from the position in 2009. However, not all of George's changes were good. He was the main cause of the IndyCar split, the splitting of American open wheel racing into 2 different series, the Indy Racing League, which was owned by George, and Championship Auto Racing Teams, also known as CART, owned by a group of team owners. He was called the man who ruined American open wheel racing because of this, as the split caused a drop of interest in both series, and was the cause of decline of American open wheel racing as a whole. He remained a member on the board of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway until his resignation from the president role in 2009, up until the purchase of IndyCar by Roger Penske in 2019. While the Speedway has been out of the family for a few years, the racing spirit still remains, with George's stepson, Ed Carpenter, still being a regular fixture in the IndyCar series to this day. 4-time winners. This entry in the Iceberg refers to the 4 drivers who have won the Indy 500 4 times. These drivers are AJ Foyt, Al Unser, Rick Mears, and Helio Castroneves. Pretty simple. Roger Penske. Roger Penske is an entrepreneur who has had a quite storied history in and around racing. He started his racing career in the late 50s in hill climbing, but then moved on to sports car racing in the early 1960s, being named the Sports Car Club of America Driver of the Year in 1961, and he also made starts in late models. The 1963 24 Hours of Le Mans and Formula One for the 1961 and 1963 United States Grand Prix. He retired from racing in 1965 to focus on his business career, as he started his first car dealership around that time. He, however, didn't leave the world of racing completely, as he returned to motorsport as a team owner, where he made his first start in 1966 24 Hours of Daytona. His IndyCar team started out in 1969, first winning the 500 in 1972, and then he started a Formula One team in 1974, winning a race at the 1976 Austrian Grand Prix, but then Penske withdrew after that season to focus on his IndyCar team. Team Penske and NASCAR made the first start in 1972 at the race of Riverside Raceway, and they got their first win in 1973 at the Western 500 that year. They have been a regular fixture across IndyCar and NASCAR ever since, gained over 100 wins in each series, gained 3 championships in NASCAR, and 17 championships in IndyCar, the latest in both series being from 2022, at least at the writing of this video, with Joey Logano in NASCAR and Will Power in IndyCar. Penske also fields cars in the IMSA and Supercar series, regularly gain wins in both. Penske has been a regular fixture across the world of motorsport for 16 years now, and they will continue to be for many years to come, still getting wins and championships. 241.428 miles per hour. IndyCar in the early 2000s was absolutely insane, more specifically kart, in which during the Indy split was a series that focused on speed versus the Indy Racing League's focused on cost control. In that period, the kart cars were producing about 900 horsepower in race trim and over 1,000 horsepower in qualifying trim. This peaked at the 2000 kart round in the California Speedway, a 2-mile-long low bank track, in which during qualifying for the race, the driver Gil de Ferrari clocked a lap in which his average speed was 241.428 miles per hour. That's 390 kilometers per hour for all the non-Americans out there. To this day, this is still the fastest average lap speed in racing history. Some cars have gone faster over a portion of the lap, with the fastest speed ever recorded at Le Mans being recorded on the Peugeot WM P88 at 405 km per hour, over 250 miles per hour. However, this was only down the long Mulsanne Straight before it had any chicanes on it. Over the next few years, kart was slowed down after during qualifying at the 2001 race at Texas, the G-forces sustained by the drivers led to them momentarily blacking out and losing consciousness, and for this, the race was cancelled. IndyCar today is not as fast, and there's little chance of this record being broken anytime soon in this or any other racing series. Aero screen. On the front of an IndyCar, right in front of the cockpit, there is a thing that looks like a windshield. However, it is for a whole different purpose. After the tragic death of Justin Wilson at the 2015 IndyCar race at Pocono, due to debris hitting his head, plans were made for a safety device to make sure that incidents like that would never be fatal again. The result of this was the development of the aero screen, which is a device strong enough to deflect any debris from hitting the driver up into the air, which was implemented for the 2020 season. Fellow open-wheel series F1 adopted a similar device 2 years earlier in 2018, but chose a different design with the halo, which IndyCar chose not to adopt due to the different car structure and the fact that IndyCars race on ovals, which are much higher average speed, which the aero screen is more aerodynamically suited for. 2011 Indy 500 finish. One of the main racing aspects that keeps us fans watching week in and week out is the sheer unpredictability of the sport and the fact that theoretically any driver could clinch the win if any number of factors line up in their favor, and the race that proves this most is the 2011 Indy 500. During the closing laps, the top drivers in contention were Dario Franchitti and rookie J.R. Hildebrand. As Franchitti lost pace due to trying to conserve fuel, which he had not pitted for a number of laps, Hildebrand took the lead with 3 laps to go. IndyCar veteran Dan Weldon, who was making his first start of the year in a part-time schedule with Sam Smith Motorsport, had recently pitted and was making up time on Hildebrand, but not enough to catch him at the end. When the white flag waved, it looked certain that Hildebrand would win. Weldon was a few seconds behind and had no chance of winning unless a miracle happened. Hildebrand went into turn 3 onto the short chute, and he only needed to make one more turn to capture the Indy 500 in his first attempt, the first time for a rookie to do so since Helio Castroneves in 2001. However, there was one more obstacle left, the lap car of Charlie Kimball on the inside. He just needed to pass him, and he would take the victory. I'll now let the video of the race play, as I can't do this spectacular finish justice with my own narration.
Careful of traffic. He's got to get around the lap. Traffic. One of the gears. No! He hit the wall. Just like Tommy Shaker. Keep your foot on the gas. Dan Weldon is going to win the race. That is unbelievable.
The Triple Crown. In IndyCar, the Triple Crown was a trifecta of the longest and most prestigious events on the calendar, and it consisted of 3 500-mile races. 1 in Indianapolis, the Indy 500, 1 in Pocono, and 1 in either California or Michigan, at the now defunct Ontario Motor Speedway, Auto Club Speedway, or Michigan Speedway. The concept was first proposed by the general manager of Pocono Speedway, Bill Marvell, in 1970 as an idea to replicate the success of the Triple Crown of horse racing with 3 500-mile races that Indycar hosted. It was first recognized in 1971 with the driver that scored the most points across all races being awarded a diamond-studded gold ring. In the next few years, drivers criticized the sanctioning body, USAC, for failing to publicize the trifecta of prestigious races, and USAC responded by establishing a prize pool and a trophy for the highest scoring driver. For the 1978 running of the Triple Crown, Al Unser became the only driver in the history of the Triple Crown to win all 3 races in a season. After the Ontario Motor Speedway closed in 1980, its spot on the Triple Crown was replaced by the 500-mile race held at Michigan Speedway, and for the next 9 years, the Triple Crown alternated between different sponsors such as Domino's and Olsenite. The Triple Crown ended after the 1989 season when Pocono left the calendar, and then after Michigan left the calendar in 2001, the Indy 500 remained the only 500-mile race in the IndyCar schedule for the years to come. However, the Triple Crown returned in 2013 when Pocono returned for the schedule, and the 500-mile race in California returned at Auto Club Speedway instead of Michigan, and it stayed on the schedule, awarding double points to its prestigious nature until the departure from Fontana from the schedule. The Triple Crown has been dormant ever since, and like the period after the first departure of the Triple Crown, the Indy 500 remains the only 500-mile race on the schedule. Double duty. Memorial Day weekend, or the last weekend of May, is undoubtedly the best weekend of the year for motorsports fans, when the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indy 500, and the Coke 600 all taking place on the same day, pretty much back-to-back, with viewers able to catch all of them without any overlap. Some racing drivers have spotted opportunity in this with the ability to race the Indy 500 and the Coke 600 on the same day, back-to-back. This involves a driver flying back and forth from Indianapolis and Charlotte for qualifying for the Indy 500 and practicing for the Coke 600 in the month of May, and then when the day comes, hopefully completing the 500, and then boarding a helicopter and flying to Indianapolis International Airport before boarding a private jet and flying to Charlotte, the period on the plane being the only time on the day where they can rest for a substantial amount of time. When the plane lands, they board a helicopter to the Charlotte Motor Speedway, where they then go on to the race of the Coke 600. This is quite the monster feat for one single driver, racing over 1,100 miles in one day, and having a schedule planned down to the minute, as a slight delay could ruin the whole schedule, and would mean the driver would miss the Coke 600. The first driver to complete this mega feat was John Andretti, in which he finished 10th at Indy, and then retired from the Coke 600 due to engine issues. The man best known for doing the double duty is Tony Stewart, who has done it twice, in 1999 and 2001. His best effort was in 2001, where he finished 10th at Indy and 3rd at Charlotte, battling through fatigue in the longest race in the NASCAR schedule to become the only driver to complete all 1,100 miles of both races on the same weekend. Ferrari almost joined IndyCar. When you think of Ferrari and motorsport, you probably think of their F1 outfit, or even their endurance racing program, but in the mid-1980s, Ferrari actually considered joining IndyCar. This was all spurred from the announcement of the new engine regulations for the 1989 F1 season, which regulated teams to naturally aspirated 3.5-liter V8s. This angered Enzo Ferrari, as Ferrari had focused on building V12 engines, so Ferrari started developing an IndyCar program as a plan for an eventual move from F1. The car, named the Ferrari 637, was being developed from 1985 to 1986 and looked like it could be ready for the tail end of the 1987 IndyCar Series season. However, the program was axed when the engine regulations for 1989 F1 were relaxed to fit into Ferrari's trademark V12, and when doubt about the chassis competitiveness came to the minds of the Ferrari bosses, and the Ferrari IndyCar program never came to fruition. Vanderbilt Cup. The early days of motor racing were chaotic, with disorganized competitions, racing on public roads still open to anyone at the time the races were happening. The first organized automotive races, in contrast to ever happen, occurred in 1904 on Long Island, New York, founded by William Vanderbilt, hence the name. The race took place on a 30-mile course of winding dirt roads, with 17 competitors showing up, with thousands also showing up to watch the battle between American and European racing machines. The first few years, the races were dominated by the European machines, with Packard and Darragh bringing the first 3 races. After a year break in 1907, the races returned on the newly built Long Island Motor Parkway until 1911, when the races alternated around various cities in the U.S. until the Cup went on hiatus from 1916 to 1935. In 1936 and 1937, the Vanderbilt Cup returned, now being hosted at the Roosevelt Raceway, in which it was run both times by European cars, with the 1936 race being won by an Alfa Romeo, and the 1937 race being won by an Auto Union. The race was stopped due to the outbreak of World War II in the years after, but it returned in 1960 as a Formula Junior event, and 1965 to 1968 as a sports car event at the Bridgehampton circuit, but without the luster and prestige of the early days, and after the 1968 race, it has never been held since. The kart and IRL split. I discussed earlier on the Holman family entry on this iceberg a little bit on the split in American open wheel racing in the mid-1990s, but time to go into more detail for this entry. Ever since the start of American top-level open wheel racing, drivers started off racing midget and sprint cars on dirt tracks before moving up to asphalt tracks, and then called kart series. But in the late 1980s and early 1990s, more foreign drivers and foreign money started flowing into the series, and the series expanded its schedule to other countries in its bid to become a world-class racing series. This priced out many smaller teams and caused many drivers who started out their career racing on dirt to not consider moving to Indycar as it was too expensive, and so they pursued other racing series, mainly NASCAR. An example of one of these drivers being Jeff Gordon. Owner of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Tony George, started fighting against these changes in these years, banning Japanese manufacturers from the sport and canceling a planned race in Brands Hatch in England. George then resigned from the kart board and announced the start of the Indy Racing League, an American-focused oval-based racing series that most importantly had control of the Indy 500, America's open-wheel racing premier event, and had 25 of its 33 slots exclusively reserved for IRL teams. And over the next few years, the series became more estranged, and this caused American open wheel spirit racing to decline, as fans were split between following 2 different series, as the IRL had the favorite tracks, and kart had the star drivers and most of the money. IRL was a dominant series in the end, as kart declared bankruptcy in 2003, and then rebranded as Champ Car, causing many established teams to move to the IRL. After the Champ Car series collapsed after the 2007 season, all teams agreed to join back into the Indy Racing League, finally ending the Indy split, which had started 10 years later and had damaged the sport drastically. The USAC and kart split. The kart and IRL split wasn't the first Indy split, as there was one that came before, happening in the late 70s, between established sanctioning body USAC and the usurper being kart. USAC was first formed by IMS President Tony Holman after AAA stopped sanctioning IndyCar in 1955, and then he shepherded the series from a largely regional-based dirt racing series to a national-caliber asphalt racing series up until the split in 1978. In the 1970s, costs began to rise, and events outside the Indy 500 weren't as publicized as the team owners wanted. After the death of Tony Holman in 1977, and the death of many other USAC officials in a plane crash a few months later, USAC leadership was weak, and so a few team owners split up to form their own open-wheel series, kart. Both sanctioning bodies ran full schedules in 1979 separately, but kart became the more prestigious series due to most star drivers driving the series, and USAC declined in attendance and races during their season, until only sanctioning the Indy 500 up after 1981, and with the exception of a sole event at Pocono, with the field being mainly made out of converted dirt cars. For the next few years, USAC only sanctioned the Indy 500, with it now being a kart points-based race, being functionally part of the kart schedule, and this split ended with the relative harmony between both sanctioning bodies. Well, that was a quite a long video, at least for my channel, and it's just the first of many to come in a series on the iceberg, so like the video if you liked it, comment if you have something to say about the topics I discussed, or about the position on the iceberg, and subscribe so you stay tuned for the next episodes on this iceberg. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.